if trios could just simply never split up? I feel like one of the main factors of trios nowadays is if a team has one bad performance, they are just instantly looking to find brand new teammates, and that can lead to a lot of people playing with a lot of different trios. But what if there was a new rule in Fortnite that as soon as the game mode gets announced, you are locked in with that trio? Well, I wanted to live in a fictional universe for a little bit and go back in time and look at some of the very first trios that were formed as soon as trios got announced, and I wanted to see which one of these players made smart decisions from leaving their old team, or if they should have stuck with the team that they were playing with from the beginning. We're gonna go over a lot of different big names in this video. Real quick to get started though, please subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, as we try our best to upload daily competitive content for you guys. Please just go K-Dog in the Fortnite item shop if you guys want to support me even more. Follow me on my Twitch, link in the description down below if you guys want to watch any of these tournaments with me. Without further ado though, let's get straight into this video. Alright, so I want to start out this video with a big name trio, and I feel like a player that ended up getting dropped and is one of the very few instances where this happens, but Clix, Muzz, and Rise was the original trio, and it was kind of insane with this team because when you were watching them every single week, if you guys were watching the tournaments back then, this team was like pretty much in the same situation that like Rise, Muzz, and Yapko were in, or like Rise, Muzz, and whoever insert a third player name is. This trio never ended up placing top 3 together, and I feel like there is a couple of different reasons why for that, but I think the main one was that Clix just really didn't fit this trio's playstyle. I feel like Rise and Muzz were just such high ground oriented players, Rise obviously being a high ground oriented IGL. Of course, a lot of the Clix community also really didn't like Rise at this time, and then when he actually ended up getting dropped for Yapko, I think Clix ending up getting dropped was secretly one of the best things to happen in his entire career. Because if we're just being real, I feel like that Clix, Muzz, and Rise trio, their ceiling was like really a top 5, maybe a top 4. They never super impressed with anything like getting super high elim games. Their chemistry was like decent, but it's definitely not anywhere to the level of the trio that he was able to get himself onto of Clix, Iamzo, and Higgs. Now we'll talk more about Iamzo and Higgs later on because they had a very interesting third that I feel like nobody really remembers for the first ever trio tournament that we had. But of course at the time, the whole lore around this was like Iamzo and Higgs were playing with Mason. Mason had to go on a family vacation, and this was right around the time that Clix ended up getting dropped, so it was basically a match made in heaven. These guys ended up forming together and they just instantly clicked. I don't think we would regard Clix as high as we do today if he had to stick with this trio of Rise and Muzz all the way up until this point now. Do I think Clix would have ever even gotten his best effort CS placement ever of a 3rd place? I honestly don't know. So for Clix, I think this worked out really well, and then for Muzz and Rise, they ended up playing with Yapko for a little bit, and they've been trying with some different people, and I think they now have officially split to go their separate ways. But I just feel like whether they had Clix, Yapko, pretty much any player in that 3rd spot, they were going to be in the exact same position that they are in today. So I would grade it pretty much just like a meh type of thing for them. The next team I want to talk about though, and a trio that was so dominant when they first formed together, was Puyo, Boltz, and Rapid. Now this team, believe it or not, was the best trio in the entire world for like a whole 2-month span. Boltz and Rapid were literally a better duo than like Peterbot and Puyo and like Peterbot and Cold for some weeks. These guys played together for every single Div Cup until the very last week, and then we know back then at that time we had that whole huge snakening when like Puyo ended up going to play with Adris and Acorn, Boltz and Rapid went to go play with Khanada, and everybody at the time, I remember the narrative was pretty much people just wanted to see those guys go back to the original teams, and nobody felt like they should have ended up splitting up. I feel like if this trio of Puyo, Boltz, and Rapid sticks together though, they 100% had top 3, maybe even top 2 potential to win an FNCS. Those guys were literally so dominant when they were together, winning multiple cash cups, absolutely dominating tournaments. Puyo up until this point was seen as like more the undershadowed, underrated player since he was playing with Peterbot for so long, and this was also them coming off of literally playing globals together, winning global championships, and then Peter didn't even want to end up trying out Puyo for a single trios tournament, and so it was just such a cool moment to see Puyo end up forming with Boltz and Rapid, and they just absolutely dominated and were literally like, I don't even think you could make an argument for anybody being better than them on NA for like a very good good amount of time. If I had to grade a player by player basis on how all three of these ended up after splitting up, for Puyo, of course, it probably ended up with like an A+ for him. He quite literally went to go on to win an FNCS with Agers and Acorn that exact same season that they split up. Boltz and Rapid ended up forming with Khanada. We all know how that went. I think they finished in like 7th place. It was just a really rough tournament from them all around, and neither of those two players have ended up qualifying for globals either. Do I think that the trio of Puyo, Boltz, and Rapid though would have been able to qualify for globals? I think 100% yes. They were such a good team together. They had so much chemistry together, and they were also just so fun to watch in general. I don't think they would be as good of a team if they ended up like reforming together today. I think Puyo is just on such a better trio, even though the vibes don't look the best on their team right now with him, Acorn, and Agers. But it is just honestly really unfortunate that we never got to see the Puyo, Boltz, and Rapid trio in a single FNCS Grand Finals. Let's talk about some EU teams, and believe it or not, Queezy's first ever trio that he played an event with was Veno and Pixie. Now, of course, we know like Queezy and Veno absolutely love playing together. They were literally like one of the best duos of all time, won FNCS together, all this sort of things. And I remember when trios first started, Pixie was still a relatively underrated player. He performed absolutely insane at globals, but he definitely wasn't regarded as high as he is today. And that trio did kind of struggle together. They didn't have any like super insane placements together. They ended up splitting pretty fast after that, but it's kind of crazy to look at it in hindsight because both Veno and Pixie would go on to win FNCS and the next 2 seasons with completely different trios. So this kind of goes back to the whole purpose of making this video. Do I think that this trio right here would have been able to win an FNCS together? I think the potential 100% could have been there for them. I just don't think they spent enough time together really trying to like gel and build up that extra chemistry together. But it's kind of insane that if you look at it from today's perspective, Queezy has not gotten a single top 3 in a grand finals, while Veno and Pixie have both won FNCS with completely separate trios. Speaking of Queezy and Pixie's new trios, the original team, and I feel like I literally didn't remember this at all, was Vana, Swizzy, and Mstach. Now this one is also so interesting because of course Vana ended up going to win an FNCS with Pixie, and then Swizzy and Mstach ended up teaming up with Queezy. And so I think the question with this trio is, does Swizzy and Mstach have better FNCS placements if they decided to stay with Vana instead of switching over to Queezy? Of course, there's so many like external factors that go along with that, like the fact that Queezy was contested for a season, but I think Vana, Swizzy, and Mstach would still be just absolutely insane if they ended up sticking together. But I mean, hey man, that's one of the spicier questions we get to ask of this entire video, because I feel like there is a real argument for some people out there that they really could make to say that Vana, Swizzy, and Mstach would have been a better trio than Queezy, Swizzy, and Mstach. Even though I feel like Queezy and Vana IGL very similar, you could probably say that Vana might be a potentially better fighter than Queezy. So would that mesh better with Swizzy and Mstach's aggressive playstyle? I don't know, man. I think they're all just insane players at the end of the day, but it is a super fun thing to look back on. Speaking of Vana, let's talk about the last player on that trio that was able to win an FNCS, and the original team that Marius played with was none other than Mr. Savage and Mongraal. Now Marius at the time was kind of similar to Pixie, but I think Pixie was still more highly regarded than Marius at the time. Marius was still seen as like kind of just a creative kid who had some decent FNCS placements in duos, but just was also known as kind of a meta merchant also. They said if it wasn't a fighting meta, then Marius was just not really going to be beneficial to a trio, and he still didn't develop like a crazy IQ at that point either. And Mr. Savage and Mongraal, of course, were coming off of arguably their best season together as a duo, even though they weren't able to qualify for globals. Going into that grand finals of that cactus meta, they looked so insane, and a lot of people would probably agree that if the cactuses never got removed, they 100% probably would have been able to make globals as well. This was though just a trio that was never able to build like super crazy amounts of chemistry together. Do I think that if these guys ended up sticking together, would they have eventually been able to win an FNCS like Marius would go down to later accomplish? No, unfortunately, I do not think that they would have. I think that they maybe had the potential to top 5, but I also don't believe that Marius would have developed into the player that he is today if he ended up sticking with Mr. Savage and Mongraal instead of playing with Vana, Pixie, all of the other trios that he explored throughout that time as well. Like if we're just being real, at that point in time, Mr. Savage and Mongraal were both pretty unsure of what they actually wanted to do with their whole future in competitive Fortnite. We saw Mongraal taking a lot of breaks. We saw Mr. Savage literally retire a couple seasons later. And Marius was still one of those players that was still like trying to go up in his career, while Mr. Savage and Mongraal were kind of just at like a steady slope. So I don't think Marius would have really had the motivation to want to continue to get better if he continued to just play with Mr. Savage and Mongraal. I want to go back to NA though and talk about the trio that originally formed of Peterbot, Bugha, and COULDN. Now this one was honestly such a surprise to so many people. The fact that Peter didn't even give Puyo a chance to trio with them because Peter didn't want to IGL or TARP at the time, so he ended up feeling like his best option to go with was Bugha. This trio played 4 total tournaments together. Their best placement together was a 3rd place, and they ended up splitting up on October 31st. I think that the ceiling of this team was probably still like maybe a top 2 in a grand finals. I don't think that this team would have won grands, but obviously any team that has Peterbot and COULDN on it has to be an FNCS win potential. I just feel like Bugha really didn't match the fighting chemistry that this team was trying to go for. They were just such an overly aggressive team, and they honestly died in a lot of fights that they shouldn't have. I feel like now looking back on it, especially knowing the type of player that Bugha is now, like he is just really never going to be able to keep up with the fighting ability of Peterbot and COULDN. And this also kind of led to Peterbot eventually realizing that he did want to IGL in the future. It is still just so crazy how many times Peterbot turned down playing with Puyo in favor of playing with other teammates, because after that he ended up playing with so many different people during that OG season. Just to list some of them off, I think it was like Boltz and Rapid, Khanada and Acorn when Khanada was the minigun. We have to talk about Khanada later because Khanada had one of the most crazy trio transformations, and then he ended up sticking with COULDN and Ritual. And so now we can say that this team has literally placed 1st place and 2nd place in FNCS Grand Finals. I don't think that necessarily the Peterbot, Bugha, and COULDN trio would have done all that well, and we know that Peterbot, Puyo, and COULDN tried to play together and get Aegis and Ritual to sign the disband forms, but of course we all know how that ended up going. Speaking of Aegis and Ritual though, the trio that they had in OG season of COULDN, Aegis, and Ritual was absolutely insane. I think you could 100% say they were the best trio in OG season until COULDN and Ritual decided to drop Aegis for Peter. Their placements that season were a 2nd, 1st, and then a 7th place, and then after they got that 7th place was when they ended up making the decision to drop Aegis for Peterbot. This is also one that is kind of crazy looking back on, because can you just imagine if Ritual was the one that got dropped for Peter instead of Aegis, and we got to see a Peterbot, COULDN, and Aegis trio? Of course though, back then Peter was not really trying to IGL, but if we got a Peter, COULDN, and Aegis trio, oh my gosh, that would have to be probably the best like solo clutch potential out of all 3 of those players in like Fortnite history, and the fighting power on that team would be absolutely disgusting. Let me know in the comment section down below if you guys think that Peterbot, COULDN, and Aegis or Peterbot, Puyo, and COULDN would be a better fighting team. I think there is a real argument for either side there. I think the trio of COULDN, Aegis, and Ritual though 100% had the potential to win FNCS Grand Finals. This was one of the teams that I was most upset about to see them actually split up, especially during the OG season when Peter was just cycling through trios. It was really cool to see a team that was just sticking together and just absolutely dominating. Especially back then, COULDN, Aegis, and Ritual would 100% be my FNCS favorites. Let's talk about the absolute madness that Khanada went on though during the first times that trio got announced. So believe it or not, the first ever team that Khanada queued a trio event with was Higgs and Iamzo. Now first of all, I just feel like this one in its own is almost a huge talking point in general. A lot of people still like to make the argument that they feel like Khanada is over Clicks. I would probably rank him above Khanada. I think Khanada is things like a better solo player, and he still has shown the potential to be an insane fragger. We just have not seen it in the last 2 grand finals, unfortunately. But looking back on it, can you say that if Khanada was originally playing with Higgs and Iamzo and they never ended up splitting up, would they have the same or even better placements than Clicks, Higgs, and Iamzo did? After that though, Khanada ended up going and playing with Dukes and Acorn, and then this was also around the time when meme coins became super big. So the next week, Khanada and Acorn decided to drop Dukes and play with Miro. They ended up literally winning a cash cup with Miro, played with him for a couple more cash cups, and then Miro also went to meme coins. So then we got the era of Khanada, Acorn, and Peterbot. They absolutely dominated the last couple tournaments of OG season. Khanada then went to play with Acorn and Aegis, and of course that trio was super good when they played together for a couple of tournaments. And then in the week 5, right before FNCS started, that is where the Khanada and Acorn drama started, when Acorn and Agers decided to drop Khanada for Puyo, and then Khanada ended up playing with Boltz and Rapid. We all know didn't have the most FNCS success, and now today he is playing with Boltz and Sphinx. I feel like Khanada unfortunately is one of those players that has gotten the least amount of luck from the new trio that he is currently on today compared to who he used to play with. Like, there was a real span of time where Khanada was arguably a top 3 player in all of NA, and now Khanada has gone back-to-back seasons not even placing top 5, and he is going to be one of the main trios to look out for, trying to fight for a position in global championships in his last chance to qualify this upcoming season. Let's talk about a couple more EU people though. I think the ones that was most fascinating to me was that Pingwox and Malibuka have pretty much been playing together since trios came back, and it really does show when you watch the performance. They are 100% obviously have always looked like one of the trios that have just the most experience together. They're such a dominant grand finals team. Even if they have a little bit of a quiet cash cup season, by the time grand finals rolls around, they are always going to be at that FNCS winning potential. A team though that I am very curious on how good they would look nowadays is the original trio that was Vico, Flixie, and Chap. Now, of course, Vico and Flixie ended up eventually playing with Veno, winning FNCS, and Chap is now with Mr. Savage and Rezon. It's just so interesting on how Chap really hasn't had any trio success compared to the people that ended up dropping him, who have literally won an FNCS and are arguably a top 3 trio in the world, compared to Chap now, who is still just trying to find a trio that he can potentially make globals with. Do I think Vico, Flixie, and Chap would have won FNCS? I'm gonna have to say, honestly, probably not. I think they 100% could have pulled off a top 3, but I think there is some other trios I would still pick over them if I had to make like an FNCS winning prediction. I don't know though, the fighting power on that team would be absolutely insane. I just feel like Veno was such a better fit for them instead of what Chap would have brought to them. Of course, Chap was coming off of an absolutely insane year, getting back-to-back second places in grand finals, top 10ing in LAN with Teeny. So maybe that trio would have been just as good as Vico, Veno, and Flixie, but I just honestly can't bring myself to say that. Now, the last one I wanted to talk about was Badil, Yanis, and Rezon. Now, honestly, with this trio, knowing what we know about them today, I don't think that this team was like ever going to be in FNCS winning potential. None of these 3 have really even necessarily placed that well in trios since the game mode came back. Well, I guess Badil actually literally got 4th place in one of the grands, so I take that statement back for him. But for Rezon and Yanis, both of them really have been kind of struggling. I don't really feel like the fighting power would be that crazy on this team either. So I think it was a good decision for all of them to split up, but now they are all pretty much in the same boat, trying to qualify for globals in the very last season, and it is going to be such an uphill battle for all of these guys. Hey man, other than that though, I just want to make another, once again, just a little bit of a fun video. Don't have so many tournaments to go over, so let me know what you guys think about every single one of these trios I went over though in the comment section down below. Remember, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, as we try our best to upload daily competitive content for you guys. Please use code KDOG in the Fortnite item shop if you guys want to support me even more. YouTube says enjoy one of these 2 videos up on the screen right now, so go check them out if you guys haven't already. Follow me on my Twitter and my Twitch, linked in the description down below, if you guys want to watch any of these future tournaments with me or just keep up to date with me. Thank God for another day, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.